Good evening, folks. Welcome to the webinar that we're hosting this evening called Growing Halifax's Cycling Network. My name is David McIsaac. I'm the Manager of Active Transportation with Halifax Regional Municipality. Joined here by four of my colleagues who you will meet later on in this presentation. So yeah, so I guess this is an event that Halifax Active Transportation Planning staff are offering as part of Winter Bike Week that the Halifax Cycling Coalition is putting on. This is an opportunity for us to share updates on some of the projects that we're working on with you. And there's lots of other activities happening this week as part of Winter Bike Week, and there's a website there at the bottom to get an update on the events. So please check those events out. All right, so I'm going to attempt to do the housekeeping slides here. So this is a system, we're using the Microsoft Teams sort of webinar system. If you would like to access the captions, the closed captioning system, you can see on the diagram there the button to, there is a button at the bottom of right of your screen there. There could be a bit of a delay before the captioning begins, but it is set up. Please note that this session is being recorded and will later be posted to Halifax Shape Your City website. You may leave the Q&A session at any time. Click the leave button if you wish to leave the session. And finally, you should see an ask a question button. So if you do have questions for us, please use that and put your comments or questions and we will look for those and do our best to address them as they come up. If you'd like your name to be on the public record, please post your first and last name with your question. If you don't want that to be part of it, you may post anonymously or provide a nickname or just your first name, entirely up to you. And then you can kind of see there's a box that states ask a question. All right. So look, we have a lot of work going on in the municipality, across the municipality, to try to make it safer and more convenient to walk and bicycle throughout the municipality. Our group does both of those modes. And tonight we're going to focus on some cycling projects and also our rural active transportation strategy. And have some short presentations on each of those initiatives and hopefully have an opportunity for questions and discussion after. All right, so I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly. So just for a bit of an understanding of who we are and how we fit into the municipal picture. We are an active transportation planning group. There are about 7 of us who are working with community groups on multi-use pathway projects like the Rails to Trails network. There are folks in our group who work to help prioritize and plan where new sidewalks get built, and folks in our group who work on planning projects for new bike lanes, for local street bikeways and multi-use pathways across the municipality. So most of our work is directed by regional council. We take our direction from them, and a lot of the actions that we're working on right now are recommendations that came out of Halifax's integrated mobility plan. So this is a plan that I like to think is aimed at creating a more multimodal city. a city where residents, visitors can get around, relatively easily, relatively safely, relatively conveniently, no matter which mode that they choose to use, or that's the most convenient for them. The plan really has a focus on sustainability and efficiency and moving our transportation system to become more diverse and to be, more sustainable. So, while, the focus is on getting more folks on transit, more people bicycling, more people walking, and really making it easier for people to take those modes and safer to take those modes. Next slide. And that's another way of saying it. Yeah, thank you. So just a little bit of descriptions of some of the facility types that we're talking about when we're talking about infrastructure that is safer and more comfortable for people to bicycle. This is a slide that sort of gives you the range of facility types, and the engineering design guidance, the standards that we get from national transportation engineering organizations have changed quite a bit, just in the last 5 years, certainly the last 10 years, in terms of the types of facilities that, the types of infrastructure that are recommended and how they're designed. So just, a little bit, on the less, and the term that we like to use is this term of all ages and ability. So we think about it in terms of cycling infrastructure that is safe for people and comfortable for people who would like to bicycle more, but don't feel safe and don't feel comfortable mixing in with motor vehicles. So, on the left side, you can see pavement markings on major streets, which really is, from a safety perspective, will signals that to drivers that they can expect bicycles there, and it usually helps guide bicycles where they can position themselves. But in terms of actual separation, it really doesn't provide that safety level of safety, and it's certainly not the kind of facility that will attract new riders. Then you move a little bit more over and you get a painted bike lane, and there you get a little bit more space and a dedicated spot. But again, it's the kind of facility where cars can get in, loading can happen, and at the end of the day, those aren't the types of facilities that we're looking to build anymore. So over on the more all ages and abilities range, we're focusing on local street bikeways. So these are traffic calmed, lower volume streets where they're really designed to be as safe as possible for people bicycling. Protected bike lanes, that's where there's a physical barrier between the motor vehicles and the people bicycling. And then off-street pathway, which, in Halifax we call multi-use pathways or trails. Those are shared pedestrian bicycle facilities. You see them a little bit more in more suburban and rural parts of the municipality, but we do have them also more in the regional center. And just a few more slides here. So looking at protected bike lanes, we didn't have any of these in Halifax, 2 or 3 years ago. We are, really focusing on getting these types of facilities built on the busier streets in Halifax that are part of our candidate network. And we're trying to do them faster. And, one of the ways we're doing them is getting them in on a more, we call it tactical or temporary basis. So using materials like those plastic bollards, sometimes like with precast concrete curb that can go in a little bit faster, it's a bit cheaper, and still offers the same level of separation and protection. In the middle, you have facilities similar to the Hollis Street bike lane and the southern part of the South Park, where we put the bike lane in and we create that separation using precast concrete curb that kind of comes in and gets placed. Again, those types of facilities could be there for a while. They're fairly intensive from an infrastructure perspective, but it's an example of the kind of street, like when we come back to do a larger scale rehabilitation of Hollis Street, we would look at, changing that arrangement and potentially sort of bringing the bike lane up to sidewalk level or half sidewalk level, and provide the separation that way. But for now, those facilities can be around for a while. But then, I would say that the permanent facility and the types of facilities that get built on those candidate streets are similar to the South Park example, where the bike lane is up, more or less at sidewalk level. Local street bikeways are another facility type that we didn't have any of until recent years. And again, these are designed to be safe for all ages and abilities. We have seen them used in other cities, and they got some much better design guidance for them in recent years. And the key to these types of facilities are making sure that there are as few cars as possible on the street. So really, the types of car use should be just for residents and their visitors. We try to put in measures that dissuade, the shortcutting vehicles, that kind of thing, and also looking at traffic calming measures to ensure that the vehicles that are there are going, at a fairly slow speed. Looking at intersection crossings is really one of the larger kind of components of these types of facilities. And the next slide. I think the next one is our multi-use pathways. So again, these are shared pedestrian bicycle facilities. These were really the backbone of the municipal active transportation network. When we started doing this work back in the 2000s, we have about 200 kilometers of these facilities. And yeah, that one I think is the Dartmouth Harbourfront Greenway. So I think this is my last slide. One of our big focuses right now, and a goal and a target that we have, is to have a network of all ages and abilities bicycle facilities in the regional center, which is the Peninsula of Halifax and Dartmouth, sort of within the circumferential highway. Those green lines sort of represent where we would like to put the facilities in. About 40% now of that network is built, and I think that's really I think that's about all I'll have to say about that one. You're going to hear a bit about some of the work that Mark Niener's leading to get sort of the southern part of the peninsula there planned. And Siobhan Witherby is going to talk about sort of the middle part of the peninsula there, the Midtown Bikeways planning process that we're working on right now. And I think with that, we're going to get into the meat of the presentation, the more substantive parts. And Siobhan Witherby, who's an active transportation planner in our group, will talk to you about the Midtown Bikeway connections planning process. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Again, my name is Siobhan Witherby. I am the project manager for the Midtown All Ages and Abilities Bikeway Connections project, co-leading with Mark Niener, who's also on the call here. And yeah, we're just going to take you through a history of the project to date and where we are now. Next slide, please. Great. So the objective of the Midtown All Ages and Abilities Bikeway project is to perform functional planning to improve the cycling connections to and through the Halifax Common. This includes upgrading some existing facilities, bike lanes and multi-use pathway facilities, to make them more suitable for all ages and abilities. It includes building new facilities where there are gaps in the network, and also improving the transitions to help move more smoothly through the network. All of this is using a complete streets lens, so looking at all of the road users with a focus on those vulnerable road users walking and cycling. So here is our policy context map. This is all driven by that map on the right, in the Integrated Mobility Plan, the Regional Center All Ages and Abilities Bikeway Network. You can see in the center of the peninsula a whole bunch of routes converge, and we need a safe and comfortable way to transition between them. In that map, they are shown as the orange and the green colors, which is the on-road protected bikeway routes and the multi-use pathway routes. So we are to investigate that a little bit more. And the main route shown in that Regional Center AAA Bikeway Network map is through Bell Road and the Commons over to Wellsford Street. One thing that we had identified as part of this project is that there may also be some demand for a connection all the way through Bell Road to Quinpool. You can see in the active transportation priorities map below that Quinpool Road is identified in that map as a future bikeway desired, TBD. And our project was kind of looking into whether or not we needed one or both of these facilities. Next slide, please. So you can see the context of this Midtown All Ages and Abilities Bikeway project. Our focus is on Bell Road, the Commons Pathway, Wellsford Street, and Queengate Place, and we have dashed that Quinpool Road connection. So we were investigating whether we needed to enhance one or both of those routes. In yellow are the intersections, the key intersections for improving the transitions. So we have the intersection of Bell Road, Sackville Street, and South Park, the one of Summer Trollope and Bell, also Wellsford crossing Roby Street and transitioning from Windsor, and the intersection of Vernon, Quinpool, and Queengate. And just kind of making sure that all of those connections are enhanced and allow people to move freely and comfortably through the network. There, you can see the light blue lines are some of our major existing cycling infrastructure right now. So the South Park protected bike lanes it'll connect to, the Vernon Street local street bikeway, the Allen Oak local street bikeway corridor, and also the Windsor Street painted bike lanes. So those are some of our key connections for development. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the existing conditions and context, there's quite a range within this center area of the peninsula. There's some on-road routes, there's some off-road, more recreational style routes. So there's a lot of kind of different context-specific considerations for those. There's routes with existing infrastructure, for example, Bell Road with the existing painted bike lanes, and then there's some streets that don't have existing infrastructure, and then considering all of the complex intersections. So you can see down there are some multi-use pathways that hit a four-way intersection at an angle. Next slide, please. There's also some kind of offset intersections that we need to address. There are some sharrows on the street transitioning into the local street bikeway context on Vernon. Some very long crossings. You can see there crossing Roby Street to get to Wellsford, and the existing multi-use pathway through the back of St. Pat's site. So kind of taking all of these together and coming up with a complete and cohesive plan to move people through this part of the network. Next slide, please. Yeah, so our key considerations are the type of facility, how we can provide high comfort, low stress, and accessible walking and cycling facilities. Like I was saying, how we transition between changing types of facilities, so getting off of a multi-use pathway into some bike lanes, the considerations for bi-directional versus unidirectional lanes. A lot of these corridors have fairly constrained right-of-way, so we're working with how to fit the desired facilities through there and what some of the trade-offs might be. We're also considering opportunities to integrate the installation with adjacent developments, for example, the QE2 hospital redevelopment site, as well as some sites along Quinpool Road, and addressing those signalized, unsignalized, and offset intersections. Next slide, please. In terms of the project timeline, it was initiated in 2019. We did some existing conditions analysis, stakeholder engagement, and held a public engagement session in the springtime of that year. We've since produced a What We Heard report and have been working a little bit on some more concept development and back and forth with the hospital. There was a break in the project. There were some kind of capacity changes and it went on the back burner for a little bit, but we've reinitiated the project, and we've brought consultants at Design Point on board to help us really dig into those intersections and how we can make it safe and comfortable to move through the network. We are developing concept plans and in the middle of engaging some of our key stakeholders along the route. We're planning to do public engagement this spring. We had hoped to do a little bit of in-person engagement. We'll see how things shake out with the public health restrictions at that point, but yeah, hopefully this springtime, then we will refine the concepts based on what we heard and recommend 30% designs to council for approval. I mentioned our first phase of public engagement, which was held in 2019. We engaged over 300 people. There were 3 pop-ups, one at Citadel High School, one at the Amera Oval, and one on the St. Pat's Greenway. So we were catching people where they are, talking with people who were walking and cycling all the time, and then people who may be a little bit less comfortable with that and are looking for improvements to make them more likely to get on a bike to get to school or to get through the neighborhood. We also hosted an online survey and a public workshop. So you can see some photos there on the right of the workshop held also at Citadel High. In general, people's facility preference tended more towards the bi-directional protected bike lanes when context wasn't taken into account, or unidirectional protected bike lanes. And interestingly, folks who weren't currently cycling or needed that extra boost seemed to be really interested in multi-use pathways. That's just something we heard through engagement. We heard that we should be focusing on the transitions at major intersections and that dismounting does not constitute something that is AAA. So we should make it so that people can stay on their bikes as much as possible. Next slide, please. We also did this interesting value-based piece in the workshop where each of the tables had to rank some of their priorities against other considerations along the corridor. So our top ranked priorities were safe and comfortable places to walk, making it safer to cross at intersections, and safe and comfortable bikeways in the top category. In the middle was the green space, and then in the lower ranked priorities, it was loading and moving goods, on-street parking, and making it easier for cars to drive. So that kind of helps us to frame our weighting and evaluation when we're looking at these trade-offs for the different types of facilities. Next slide. We also had some specific questions about folks who are already thinking about the street segments itself and what would make them most comfortable. So on Wellsford Street, the highest ranked bicycling facility was a bi-directional protected bikeway, and on Bell Road it was unidirectional protected bike lanes. So we're kind of taking that into account as we develop the concept designs. Next slide, please. When determining whether to do just the Commons Wellsford route or if we should also add on the connection through Bell Road to Quinpool Road, our big question was whether or not we would be able to make it comfortable enough for people to move through the Willow Tree intersection, which is fairly significant, to a point where they would use it in their daily travel. We heard from more than half of the folks that they would use both connections, just kind of depending on their destinations. So that was helpful in giving us the direction to proceed further with planning the Bell Quinpool connection as an alternative route. Next slide, please. Since then, we've been doing some back and forth with Nova Scotia Health Authority with the QE2 development. There was a memorandum of understanding signed between the city and the province that designated some extra space on the south side of Bell Road to the purposes of walking and cycling and transit. And we were just kind of going back and forth with them to see exactly how much space would be available, as that would influence the recommended design for that section. Also kind of working through the Bell Quinpool Wellsford, not the Bell Quinpool Cogswell and Roby intersection, the Willow Tree, just to make sure that we could actually get people through there in a way that's comfortable for all ages and abilities. So we have been kind of moving those concepts forward. Next slide. In terms of our concept development, you can see on the right some ideas that we might be having, but yeah, just developing the bikeway options that balance the trade-offs. We're focusing on the intersections and favoring protected intersections wherever possible. So that helps to ensure that people can stay on their bikes without dismounting, and creates the ability to move around the area in as many different ways as possible in a protected way. We're building on the Halifax Common Master Plan concepts that were just approved by Regional Council. And yeah, considering accessibility and incorporating pedestrian improvements. Next slide, please. Our next step is just finishing up our round of internal stakeholder engagement before we go to the public. So our plan is to host that second round of public engagement in the spring of this year, and then put some concepts on the table for people to look at and kind of choose between options or voice their support if you think we've kind of captured some of the needs through this area. We'll kind of take that feedback and recommend it to council for implementation. There are some opportunities to do some interim improvements in the meantime. So we're looking at the possibility of adding some curbs, bollards, paint, pavement markings to make it safer in the interim while we wait for the construction of these routes. And yeah, the permanent implementation is pending council approval. Because the route is so long and there's a few different sections, there will be a phased implementation, and there are a few moving pieces in terms of integrating with development, especially on Bell Road and Quinn Pool. So those pieces, we may have to wait on timing for that. Next slide, please. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to throw it to Chloe to moderate the question period, and yeah, I welcome any discussion.
Great, thank you, Siobhan. My name is Chloe Kennedy. I'm another AT planner who's going to be moderating the discussion this evening. So we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions for Siobhan about the Midtown project, or if there's any questions for David about any of the AAA pieces that he presented on. If not, then we can skip to Mark Neener, who's next and is going to be presenting about the Peninsula South. So far we have no questions. There also will be a few minutes at the end if anyone has any final questions, plus our contact information if anyone wants to follow up on any of the pieces that they heard this evening. So we don't have any questions in the queue, so maybe in the interest of time, we'll just pass it over to Mark, and then, oh, actually.
Yeah, sometimes there's a little bit of a delay when people type it in when we receive it, but yeah, we'll see if there's anything coming in and then go to Mark.
So we have one for Siobhan. And this question says, what's the status of removing bag buttons at intersections where cars are given an automatic green light, but cyclists and pedestrians are required to press a button?
All right. I know we did hear quite a few comments on this in the Midtown engagement about some of those buttons. I think wherever possible, where there's a signalized intersection, we're trying to make it so that the signals automatically trigger, like you don't need to push a button to have the walk signal or the bike signal go. It should automatically provide that opportunity each time the signal switches for the vehicles. Yeah, that's something that we've definitely heard and are taking into consideration with the proposed concept design in this. Great,
and we have another couple of questions that have come in.
Okay. Go for it.
So the next, these two questions are very related. They're saying this all seems to be a little bit slower than was promised. What's holding things up? And also, can we get an update on timelines for Windsor Street and Bell Road upgrades?
All right, I can speak to the Midtown piece. We did initiate it in 2019, and we worked at it for a bit. We had initially started it as an internal project, so there was a team of 4 of us, 2 AT planners and 2 design engineers who were moving the project forward. Unfortunately, there were some kind of staffing changes and the capacity was lost. So it went on the back burner, unfortunately, for a little bit. But we now, realizing that we need the additional assistance to move it forward, we're happy to have the consultants at Design Point to provide their expertise in that intersection design piece. Like, we could do the mid-block bit, but the intersections, particularly through this area, are quite complicated to try and fit everything in and get the design right. So having them on board is really useful, and we are kind of chugging away to try and get these functional plans complete. I might defer to David on the question about Bell Road and Windsor Street, if that's okay. Are you able to take that, David?
For sure. So Bell Road will be part of the Midtown process that Siobhan is working on right now. We're looking to see if we can do some tactical quick build improvements on Bell Road this summer. It's a fairly narrow street, so there's some challenges to get kind of complete separation, but we're going to look to see if we can make an improvement. Windsor Street we're kind of doing it in pieces right now. There's some work going, have some analysis of the Windsor Street, Bears Road, Yonge Street intersection, so that as we build the bus lanes on the Bears Yonge Street corridor and make intersection changes, we're building in the protected bike lanes to the intersection there. Similar, what you're going to see on Windsor Street is more protection a little bit at the northern end first, and we will be looking to connect the Almond Street Bikeway to the Liverpool Street local street bikeway in the next year or so. And then the biggest focus on the southern end is the Windsor-Chebucto-Kennard intersection. So there's been some work to see how we could reconfigure that intersection in a way to get the protected bike lanes through there and manage, the other movements that need to happen there. So Windsor Street is going to kind of come in probably in pieces, and really the main kind of factor with Windsor Street is the intersections. I'll also tell you the southern end of Windsor Street is quite narrow. As you go north on Windsor Street, we have more width to work with and the ability to get that separation in. So one of the next big steps is to kind of figure out what the options could be at that narrow end of Windsor Street.
Okay, so that does wrap up the time that we had allotted for the question period for Midtown. We had a few more questions that did come rolling in, and we'll try to get to those at the end if there's time, because we still have 2 more projects to present on before 8 o'clock. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark Nieder to talk us through the Peninsula South Complete Streets project.
Thanks, Chloe. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Next slide, please, Chloe. So I'm the lead on the planning project called Peninsula South Complete Streets. We're working with a team of HRM staff and also 2 consulting firms, some transportation engineers from Englobe, and planners, landscape architects, and engagement specialists from Upland, based in Dartmouth. So the objectives of this project include exploring options to add new bicycle infrastructure to a number of streets in the south end of the Halifax Peninsula. And these are connections that we're trying to make that are part of the Integrated Mobility Plan, All Ages and Abilities Network. So those connections include an east-west route from the existing Halifax Urban Greenway at South and Oxford, all the way down towards the east to Hollis Street, to our existing bike lanes on Hollis Street and Lower Water, as well as a connection along Roby Street from University to the south to connect to the St. Mary's campus. Of course, there's many important origins and destinations for active transportation trips along those corridors, including the 2 universities and the hospital campuses as well. We're also developing what we're calling a district identity for University Avenue. So recognizing that University Avenue has a unique character as a street, it's also part of the Halifax Common. We're working to establish a common design vocabulary that can be applied to the street, both as part of this project, but also as part of future capital projects along the street. And so this district identity one of the deliverables of that is to produce a design guide that will recommend various treatments for sidewalks, boulevards, street furniture, lighting, signage, and other elements that can sort of help convey that special sense of place along that street. Similar to the project that Siobhan took us through, we're also applying the Complete Streets lens or approach as per the IMP, which means that we're looking to improve conditions for all users, but with a particular focus in this study area for people walking, cycling, and taking transit. And we are also in 2 phases engaging members of the public and stakeholders along the way. Next slide, please. This again is the AAA network from the Integrated Mobility Plan, and you can just see on that map I've highlighted the University Ave Morris corridor, as one of the corridors that we're looking at for this project. It makes up a key east-west spine in the network and in the south end of the peninsula. Next slide, please. Now, the Roby Street connection down to St. Mary's is not part of the IMP network, but it was identified in the 2014 Active Transportation Priorities Plan as a candidate cycling route. And because of the obvious intersection at University and Roby, we felt like this was the right opportunity to explore options for that route as well, so that we could figure out how ultimately the preferred types of infrastructure would connect at University and Roby. Next slide, please. So we initiated this process back in 2019. We had our first round of public engagement late that year. So now we are heading into our second phase of public engagement. So we've done some route analysis. We've developed a number of concepts for those routes and have been evaluating them and working sort of to understand the implications of all of them. And we're now preparing to bring all of that information and those concepts to the public this spring. And so once we hear from the public and stakeholders, we will we'll work to finalize the preferred options. We'll work on bringing a recommendation forward to council sometime later in 2022. Next slide, please. So this is our study area for the project. So this is an area that's sometimes referred to as the institutional district, where we find the 3 campuses of Dalhousie, St. Mary's University campus. We have the IWK hospital, as well as the VG site as part of the QE2 hospitals. You know, east of South Park, centered on Morris Street, we also have the historic neighborhood of Schmidtville and the Schmidtville Heritage Conservation District. And then you can see, you can see those in yellow, those kind of endpoints of the corridors that we're trying to connect through, with new bicycle facilities. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, could you go back? I'm sorry, I just wanted to make one more point. So for the purposes of developing concepts, we divided the project into four segments, and you see those labeled in the image. So when we come to the public with options, with the concepts in the spring, we'll be talking about the concepts for the East Connection. We'll be talking about University Ave and Roby Street, and then we'll also be talking about concepts for the West Connection. Next slide, please. Just a couple of photos of University Ave on the left and Seymour Street in the center there. Also a photo of University Ave, pre-pandemic, that showed some of the incredible pedestrian traffic volumes that we see between campuses, especially when classes let out and students are moving between the campuses. The need for space for people walking is clear, and you can see from the photo on the left that the existing infrastructure is just not up to the demand. It's undersized, it's in poor condition. You can see the desire lines and the wear paths next to the sidewalk, where the overflow of people walking kind of wears down the grass. And there's also some standard accessibility features that are missing from the street, just because it has been so many years since the street was recapitalized. For example, proper accessible curb ramps with tactile warning plates. All of those kind of features that are now standard would be installed as part of this project. We'd be looking to integrate installation of any bike lanes with upgrades to these sidewalks, and also likely a full recapitalization of the street, which would include probably new sidewalk, new curb where it's required, and new asphalt in the street where it's required as well. Next slide, please. For those of you who bike in this part of the peninsula, you're probably familiar with the existing on-street protected bike lanes that were installed back in 2016 as part of a pilot project that was initiated by Dalhousie. Following the end of the pilot project, HRM took over the facility, and we've just been maintaining that until we're ready to build something more permanent. During the pilot, there was quite a lot of work to gather feedback on this facility, and we've learned a lot. We learned a lot at the time, and a lot of lessons, I guess, from the design of this facility that we're going to apply, of course, that are informing the concepts that we're developing as part of this project now. For example, we know that the design of these bike lanes, where there are openings in the barrier mid-block to allow for loading and unloading next to the curb, which means vehicles are basically stopping in the bike lane. It's not an effective solution to accommodate loading, and it's not something that we would repeat. And we are, working to accommodate those loading demands without it interfering with the cycling facility. Next slide, please. So our first round of engagement in 2019, that was early in the project. We were, asking people to help us kind of understand the existing conditions, how people travel through the area currently, and also we started to get into what people's vision was for the future of transportation through the study area. We hosted 2 workshops and a number of pop-up sessions at all of the Dell campuses and at some of the hospital sites. We also hosted an online survey and interactive map where people could drop pins on a map in the study area and leave comments. And we also had various meetings with community based stakeholders and the institutions along the corridor as well. And you can find the summary report of that engagement on our Shape Your City page. There's a lot of good information in that report. And I would encourage you to check it out if you haven't already. Next slide, please. The report goes into a lot of detail about the feedback that we heard. I'm not going to read through all of these points now, but this is just a very high-level sort of summary of some of the main themes that emerged from the input. On the left is what are the themes that emerged about the current experience, and then on the right, the future experience, the way that people would like to be able to travel through the area and the changes that they'd like to see. So we definitely heard that people who are walking or cycling now don't always feel safe. There's a lack of infrastructure, both for people walking and cycling. As I mentioned before, sidewalks are too narrow, and just a lot of conflicts between the various users, between people driving, walking, and cycling. So in the future, people would like to see those conflicts mitigated. So just better facilities, better intersection treatments to help reduce those conflicts and allow people to walk and bike more safely and comfortably through the area. A lot of interest in improving accessibility, and then also, of course, a lot of interest in retaining the existing trees and green space along University Ave and along Morris Street and Roby Street that make up constitute like part of the character of those streets. Sorry, I'm going a little over here, so I'm going to have to pick up the pace. Next slide, please. We can skip this one. Let's go to the next. So following that first round of public engagement, we got into investigating the route options to make all of these various connections. And you'll see here for the east connection, we've explored 3 possible route alignments. One along Morris Street, which is the route from the IMP and the AT plan. We also, as an alternate, looked at a route along Clyde through the Sexton campus and down Bishop Street. And then we also looked at South Street. Then we've got University Ave and Roby at the middle section there. And then for the west connection, we also looked at 3 options, including some connections through the Dow Studley campus, along South Street, and along some residential streets south of South. Next slide, please. So we've done quite a lot of work to explore different concepts for all of these routes. We've looked at a total of 10 streets within the study area, and we've done quite a lot of work to understand the implications of these various concepts and evaluate them, and try and you know, kind of narrow the focus a little bit. So we'll be bringing the top ranking options forward to share with the public. That'll be kind of the focus of our second round of public engagement, although we're going to have information about all of the concepts developed so far available for people to look through. And we'll also see an example of the district identity applied to one block of University Ave as an illustration of how those features might look once once constructed on the street. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend too much time on this just because of time constraints here, but this was just a, we'll be able to explain this in more detail during our second round of public engagement. But it's we developed an evaluation framework to help us kind of understand the various trade-offs of the options, and understand how well they were achieving the project objectives compared to other options. And you'll just see on that list all of the criteria that we've considered as we review and evaluate each of the options. So we'll have more time to dig into that when we come back for public engagement. Next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. So there's going to be a variety of ways to engage with the project, starting in March or early April. We are going to produce 4 short videos. We are producing 4 short videos that are going to provide an overview of the project and explain the concepts. We're going to again have an online interactive geo survey or map, basically, that will place the concepts kind of on a map of the streets, and you'll be able to zoom in and drop pins and make comments and respond to some questions. We're going to host some small group conversations online. We're also, if restrictions allow, we'd like to do some small person events again, but that's going to depend on what the public health measures are at the time. And we're going to have lots of information and our analysis available on the project page. We also will continue to work with our project advisory committee, which is made up of a number of external stakeholders, including representatives from all of the institutions along the University Ave corridor. And then we will continue to work with our internal technical committee as well, which is comprised of staff from a range of HRM departments. That's my last slide, I think. Maybe should we hold, well, I'll let.
Great. So we just had one question about the status of Morris Street and the concern that the silence and lack of updates from staff had fueled opposition without any actual information. So I think that Mark's update around the status that round 2 engagement is just about to start. And for the last number of months, we've been working on concepts and firming those up so that we have something to take back to the public. So hopefully everyone will be able to fill out surveys and attend some of the events that Mark will be hosting starting this spring for Peninsula South. So with that, we'll switch over to Megan Backus in the remaining time to talk through the rural AT strategy.
Hi, thanks for joining in, everyone. I'm going to try to keep this really quick and high level just in the interest of time, because I know there are some questions and hopefully we'll still be able to maybe stay a couple minutes late and answer some of the burning questions. I'm Megan Backus, Active Transportation Planner with HRM, and I just want to give everyone a high-level primer on the municipality's very new rural active transportation strategy. In this program, there's a lot of information I could give to you today. I'm going to try not to get too far into the weeds, but talk about a little bit about the project background, what elements make up this this new program, and we also have a new funding approach for how we would like to look at rural sidewalks. Similar to other projects, our directions coming from the Integrated Mobility Plan and recommendations in the Active Transportation Priorities Plan, and we also received a motion from Transportation Standing Committee back in December 2019 to directing staff to put together a staff report on how we would establish something like a rural active transportation program. Currently, what AT planning looks like in rural HRM. What our team is doing is providing grant support to community associations to operate and maintain the multi-use pathways that are in our rural areas and on provincial land. So this is like your rails to trails that people might be familiar with, St. Margaret's Bay, Atlantic View Trail, things like that. So there are grants available there. We also do have a handful of sidewalks in our rural area that some people might be familiar with, some small segments in Upper Tantallon, some in Sheet Harbor that were built in 2010, and in Porters Lake as well. And then number 3 there, we do have some provincial and HRM owned paved shoulders. Hammonds Plains and Sambor are 2 of those examples. These have been built on a bit of an ad hoc basis, between HRM and the province. As opportunities to add these shoulders come up with different project integration opportunities during road recapitalization or reconstruction. So what we're currently lacking is a program that would allow us to implement sidewalks in rural centers that would connect people to a cluster of nearby destinations by walking, biking, or rolling. So another point is something we're noticing in the AT team is that we're getting a lot more requests from rural communities across the municipality for sidewalks and AT facilities. And right now there's just not a clear program path forward for them to, take those requests and go through a process into implementation. And lastly, working with the province is key when we're doing any rural work because the province owns a lot of these right of ways, and there are also opportunities for cost sharing and grants. So when we were developing the program, we had to decide what is rural. There's a lot of different examples in HRM documents as to what we consider rural, suburban, and urban. Some examples are up there. Regional plan, it's more about land uses. Urban service area, it's about road standards and how we're dealing with servicing for water and wastewater. Urban transit service, so where they're investing in transit in the urban areas. And then there's tax policy. So we discovered that that the urban general tax rate pays about 3.3 cents more than the suburban and rural rate, which is the same. And sidewalks are the only difference in that general rate. So that 3.3 cent difference funds sidewalks in the urban area. The suburban and rural are not paying that. So therefore, we decided that the geographic scope of the program should be both the suburban and rural areas. They're both in the same boat with having trouble getting sidewalks implemented due to that funding piece. This is just a summary of how we developed the program. So we worked with WSP. They did a lot of really great work for us. And once they were finished up with their final reports, HRM staff took that and did further evaluation of how we could implement something like this in the context of HRM. So as far as the main elements of the program, our top priority is implementing sidewalks within the rural centers. So we have a staff report that outlines how staff would like to prioritize communities and make decisions on who we should really focus on first. It recommends a new funding approach for funding these sidewalks. Sidewalks could look like a traditional sidewalk, kind of like what you're seeing up in that the top left corner, or it could also be a wider multi-use pathway that enables bicycles, depending on the context. We on-road connections connecting the rural centers. These aren't proposed as priorities at this point, but rather as options that we can pursue if we have opportunities to integrate or council direction. We also want to continue our support for community-led multi-use pathways. So here's a map of the rural centers that we've identified, as well as the spines between them in no particular order, but we're looking to have these added to our active transportation priorities plan so that you know, formalizing them for infrastructure in the future. And so a high-level primer on the funding approach we're looking at. So right now we have an area rate administrative order that would allow a community to receive a sidewalk. However, they would be responsible for paying for the cost of building and maintaining it, and splitting that cost among property owners on their property tax rate. So the new approach that we're recommending is that communities, after they receive their sidewalk, would have an area rate applied on them that would make their rate equal to the urban tax rate. So it would have an additional 3.3 cent rate per $100 of their assessed property value. So here there's some details. They might be a bit hard to read. I'm seeing the text is a bit small on the screen, but who pays? So it's going to be any property owner within a community after they've received their sidewalk. They have that 3.3 cent rate applied. After analysis of suburban and rural property values, it looks at you know, about $91 per year based on your average single family home. The rate wouldn't be based on the project cost. It's not expected to fully fund most projects and would likely require some general revenue additional funding as well. And also we did look at it from like the equity perspective. So all the ratepayers in that community would be charged the same rate anywhere in the rural or suburban area after they receive their sidewalks. So it creates predictability for them. That rate isn't going to change if we get out there and the site conditions are difficult or things end up costing more than we were initially expecting. And also in this case, the community receives the facility that they really need, regardless of what that revenue from their area rate would be. So if we have a community that has lower property values, maybe has less people living in their community, but they have a lot of traffic safety concerns, and you know, a lack of a way to use AT in their community, we can still go out and work with them to find a facility that that meets all of those needs, and we won't have to compromise based on, you know, the amount of money that they're able to generate through that area rate. So recently we brought this proposed program at the time, to the Transportation Standing Committee, and that was just on January 27th, 2022. And then just 2 days ago at Regional Council, we brought the program in front of Council and gave a similar presentation to today, and they passed the motion. So that's establishing the Rural AT program as, you know, program framework at this point, but there's still a lot of work to do. So we do have to get started on implementing the program. A few points here of what we're going to be working on in the near future. Prioritizing that list of 14 communities, looking at how we can maintain and clear these sidewalks in the winter, eventually going out to do community engagement with that first, you know, couple of communities we want to focus on, talking about cost sharing with other orders of government, and also returning to council with amendments to actually add the communities and spines to the priorities plan and talk a bit more about those area rates. So that's the end of my presentation. Hopefully it just kind of piqued your interest in the program. If anyone's interested in digging in further, I can stick the link to the staff report in there, and you can take a closer look at what we had proposed and what was recently moved at council. But yeah, I'll pass things off to Chloe now.
Great. Thank you, Megan, and thanks for doing the kind of abridged version for us. But we will have, there's lots of information as well online that we'll have available in the coming while on the rural AT strategy as it moves forward. So we have had some questions rolling in. So we did have one question about kind of a general one, and maybe David, you could speak to this one. This person says, it seems like there are currently only plans to design projects this year. Will there be any Any AT construction projects happening in 2022? So this person's asking what's going to be built or what's slated for construction in 2022.
Sure. So there are, you know, a number of projects in line for construction in 2022. As much of the Almond Street Bikeway, for example, as we can construct in 2022, is on our list. We also have a project pending some property acquisition that we want to do on the Dartmouth Harbourfront Trail to connect one of the gaps in that segment and hopefully to fix some accessibility issues with some chicanes across the tracks there. The Hollis Street bike lane should be extended in 2022 up to Barrington Street as a unidirectional facility, and that would also connect with the Terminal Road bike lanes that we had intended to build in 2021, but got pushed to 2022. There's a couple others. Also, yeah, we're going to be doing some work at exit 0, where the 102 highway intersects with Joseph Howe, which is also where the Chain of Lakes Trail crosses. And at that point, we're going to build a better connection into the peninsula. So change to the signals there, new crossing treatments, both going across exit 0, so parallel to Joseph Howe, and going over to Elliott Street. And then there'll be a way using some local streets there. We'll build a little bit of a multi-use pathway and kind of trying to gradually get closer to that segment of the multi-use pathway that was installed on Bears Road in the last couple of years. Spending about, you know, the AT budget has a lot of new sidewalk in it, so it's about, you know, $2.5 million on new sidewalk planned for construction in 2022. But yeah, very, you know, probably building as much in 2022 as maybe a bit more than we have in past years. We're also in 2022 going to try to do some more quick build or tactical AAA bike lanes. So, for example, looking at the North End local street bikeway, we have approval from the council to do that. It's about 4 kilometers long, so it's going to take us, you know, a number of years to get it in permanently. We're looking at ways to use, you know, more quick build measures to get the safety improvements and the connectivity improvements in now. So that's a quick overview.
Great. Thank you, David. And I will acknowledge that we are 8 minutes over our time, so I still see that there are still 16 people with us. So thank you so much for sticking with us. And we can take a few more questions. If anyone specifically has questions for Mark about the Peninsula South project or otherwise. So there is one here that says, is there any plan to connect the Shearwater Flyer Trail to the Dartmouth Waterfront Trail? Currently, it isn't very accessible through Pleasant Street past the old refineries.
I can do that one, Chloe. So yes, there is a planning process underway. It goes from Acadia Street on Pleasant Street, so it's kind of on that 4-lane section of Pleasant Street, also connecting into the Dartmouth Harbourfront Trail, and we're looking to take it out to the Shearwater Flyer Trail. The options, and we're going to take a lot of these options out for consideration to the public in the spring. A lot of things has been pushed back to the spring because we had hoped to do a lot more in-person public engagement this winter with some projects, but we're, you know, kind of playing that game right now. But yeah, that's very much an active project. Public should be hearing some more about that in the next few months. And we also have a funding application into the province and the federal government to help pay for it. It's a fairly significant cost to put that in, but yeah, working on that one.
Great. Thank you, David. And I've been typing some quick little chats to a few of the questions as well. And this is another question that we got. Someone earlier had asked about the North End bike lane project as well. So I had sent that person Siobhan's email address, and it's also listed here. Siobhan's also the project manager for the North End Bikeway project. And this is another question about that. And this is saying, when will the bikeway connection from North Street to the Mcdonald Bridge be modified? It's a 3-decade mistake that has yet to be fixed. Certainly we're, yeah, there's some issues with the on-ramp to the Mcdonald Bridge, and there is some exciting changes coming in the future years. I'm not sure if David or Siobhan, one of you wants to tackle this one.
I can provide a quick update on that one. So that project is part of what we call the Mcdonald Bridge Bikeway Connectors project, where we looked at better connections on both sides of the Mcdonald Bridge. We are almost finished on the Dartmouth side. There's a bit more work to do there with the protected bike lanes on Wise Road, with the signals, and we'll be installing some of the newly approved bike signals that we can now have in our toolbox in Nova Scotia over on Wise Road. On the Halifax side, right now we're targeting tendering the project in 2022 with some probably off-site construction happening, and hoping to get most of the construction happening in 2023. Still working on finalizing the design. It's a tight spot there where we're trying to get the bikeway connection in, future-proof it for bus rapid transit, adapt some of the transit stops and some of the signal timing there to enable the new routing for the #1 bus that will now in the future be heading southbound on Gottingen Street. So lots of moving pieces there, but it's coming together, and we're aiming to have the shovels in the ground in 2023 on that one.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Let's see, a couple more here. Let's see. So the final question that it looks like we have here is about, and this is perhaps a good one to help wrap things up. It's how can advocates help? Let's see. Sorry, it's just taking a minute to load here. Sorry, folks, having a little freeze here. There we go.
You got it, Chloe? Okay, I was going to read it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Good.
So how can advocates best support you in getting things built ASAP and not years from now? So I'm not sure if Mark, Megan, or Siobhan, or David, or one of you wants to take that one on.
I mean, we are building things now. We all want it to go faster, but it's a bit of a process when you're working in the right of way. I think we wouldn't be, I think we have made some significant progress in Halifax in recent years, and I don't think we would be here where we are now without councillors hearing from advocates, everyday citizens, community groups, that kind of thing. At the end of the day, we get our direction and approval and our budget from regional council. So making sure that your local councillor, your representative knows that this is something that you're interested in seeing, I think is important. Really where we're at right now, and the stage that we're at in trying to retrofit existing streets, we need help on the funding side, and we are getting some substantial funding from provincial and federal governments, but we're going to need more. So it doesn't hurt to let your elected officials at those orders of government know. Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's effective. We all, the five of us, I guess, we hear from councillors, and usually when a councillor gets, some questions from a resident or a number of questions, they reach out to us or to our directors. So it's important to do, and we appreciate it.
All right, and with that, we're going to wrap up our session. So all of the email addresses for Mark, Megan, and Siobhan are located on the screen there. So please do jot them down. Feel free to follow up with our team. We're happy to answer questions and keep conversations going. So thank you so much for attending the webinar this evening, and hope you guys have lots of safe and happy winter bike rides.
Good night. Thanks everybody for attending. Appreciate it.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you.